Hold on. Okay.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Karen Carboner, and I am the president of the Walt Whitman Initiative, a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission it is to celebrate New York City's literary legacy. And we serve also as an organizing center for cultural activism and poetry related events, such as the one you're going to enjoy tonight. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram and tune into our YouTube channel to explore more presentations on our Robust American Love speaker series. If you like what you're hearing, there are many ways to support our programs and initiatives. All you have to do is visit our website and or you can even write to Walt, that is Walt at waltwhitmaninitiative.org. We decided to offer this speaker series, and I want you to note the word speaker, not lecture, to present timely public-facing conversations on Whitman's life, work, and legacy. You'll hear conversations and enjoy presentations by teachers, poets, grad students, artists, printers, today musicians, absolutely world-class musicians and people in the music world. Very, very honored about this presentation. So as you see, this is not designed to be a series of academic talks, but really free, open, and informal discussions. We invite you to take part in these. We have a Q&A session at the end of each session. So if you are watching on YouTube right now, you can post your questions in the chat section and we can see if we can get to them in the last 10 minutes or so of the presentation. And if you miss one of our events, you can always catch them on our YouTube channel as well. We have listed also the upcoming shows and the past shows. And I just wanted to say a few words about what is coming up next week, October 22nd. Again, the series is always on Thursdays, 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We have Barbara Baer from the Library of Congress, and many Whitman scholars will know and revere that name. She's sort of the keeper of the gate of the biggest Whitman collection in the world. The Library of Congress has been actively digitizing this collection for the use of scholars as well as the general public. And Barbara is going to introduce us to using that. She's going to be joined by the journalist Wally Suffolk and also myself. And we're going to explore some of these very rich digital resources on Whitman's life and work. Specifically, we're going to look at a very precious notebook that Whitman kept in the 1850s called the Crossing Brooklyn Ferry Notebook. And we're going to show an assignment that I gave in a Whitman course I recently taught. And Wally was actually a graduate student in that course. And he will talk about the ways in which those digital collections can really provide fresh insights on Whitman's poetry and also on his creative process. So please don't forget to join us next week for that. We will take a break for the week before Election Day, just to sort of the calm before the storm, I guess. But we'll be back on November 5th when we'll have the master printer Barbara Henry, who runs the Harsimus Press, back to talk about Whitman, the printer poet. She's going to be talking to us from her studio and introduce us to the world of letterpress printing. So if you're intrigued with the process behind the poetry, the actual physical process, please join us that day, November 5th, for Barbara, who is one of the fantastic printers in my life and a great, great artist that I've worked with in the past myself. November 11th, the next week, Karin Coonrod, who is the director of Campagna de Columbari, will be talking about actually performing Whitman. She's written and performed many times the experiential show More or Less I Am, which is based on lines from Whitman's poem Song of Myself. An absolutely spectacular show that they've been touring worldwide. So delighted to have the director of that show come and talk to us about Whitman from a theatrical perspective. Tonight, we have Whitman from the musical perspective. And I am absolutely honored to host this discussion of Norman Corwin's classic 1944 radio play, Whitman. So you're saying to yourself, I bet even the Whitmaniacs out there, I don't know this show. What is this? Well, you shouldn't know this show. That's why we're here today. We're telling you about a new world premiere recording by the PostClassical Ensemble, and many of the people involved have joined us today to talk about this. You may know the name Norman Corwin. He was the genius of American radio drama. Um, and if you're thinking of Psycho, Citizen Kane, North by Northwest, the soundtracks for this, that wonderful, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting myself confused. See, I'm out of my wheelhouse here. Norman Corwin was the genius of American radio drama, but Bernard Herrmann was Hollywood's supreme film composer. Apologies, friends out there. So it's Herrmann that we have to thank for Psycho, Citizen Kane, Vertigo, and etc. So in 1944, Herrmann and Corwin came together to create this radio drama called Whitman to rally the home front during World War II with an appeal to the ideals of American democracy. Corwin's script was culled from Leaves of Grass. I think everybody out there is going to have a lot of fun listening to the tracks. We've got 4 very special tracks to play for you tonight. And those familiar with Whitman will smile because you'll hear lots of very recognizable phrases and stanzas, but intermixed with a sense of humor. It seems like the two of them really knew their Whitman and had a good time, put a real sense of humor and dramatic flair into the lines that they used for this radio drama. So we're going to be talking about, as I said, this wonderful world premiere recording, how this thing came about. And I am honored to be joined by 3 very important members of the organization, the people that actually got this radio play rediscovered and also re-recorded. So Joe Horowitz here. Thank you, Joe, so much for joining us today. I guess you produced the recording and you are, and this is a super modest little bio that Joe sent me. So if you really need to hear more about Joe, you're gonna have to do some research. He's a historian of American music whose 10 books explore the American experience. I'm looking at the liner notes for the recording and I see a lot more fun stuff about Joe here, including that you were the executive director of the Brooklyn Philharmonic for many years and you've received national attention for festivals exploring the folk roots of concert works. There's a lot of accolades on here. Joe, thank you so much for coming down today.
Thank you, Karen. We actually have Murray now. You've got 4 of us rather than 3.
Oh, great. I didn't see him come on. Okay, so I'm going to introduce all 4 of you. I know Joe from last year when we were working on a lot of events for Whitman's 200th birthday. Joe was very involved with that. So happy to see you again, Joe. And next up, Angel Gil Ornondiez. I'm sorry if I butchered that, Angel.
No, that was great.
Okay, thank you. Always gracious. He conducted the new recording that we're talking about today, and he is also the music director of the PostClassical Ensemble. There are even more accolades here for Angel on the liner notes that I'm looking at. This is, for instance, Angel's 9th Naxos release. So we are in music. We're in the presence of musical royalty. Angel, thank you so much for coming to the show today.
It's a great pleasure and an honor. Thank you, Karen.
Wonderful. And William Sharp, and may I call you Bill? Bill?
He's muted.
Oh, if you
Sorry.
That's okay.
Please call me Bill.
Okay.
Just don't call me late to dinner.
All right, very good. So we have Bill Sharp, who is a very prominent American concert baritone. Right here again on the liner notes, I see that you're a frequent guest with the PostClassical Ensemble and recently appeared on some very impressive recording tracks, worked at the Washington National Cathedral, a really preeminent concert singer in America, and you happen to play Whitman in this recording. So you are our Walt today.
That's true. It's been a pleasure, a great responsibility, and very enlightening. It's just great.
And I'm sure I have questions about that, you playing Walt, and I'm sure that our audience is also very interested in that. So delighted to have you here, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
And Murray, wonderful to see you again.
Good to see
Murray
you.
Horowitz is joining us, and now we're in the presence of radio royalty. Murray hosts the Big Broadcast, which I'm sure many of you enjoy, as do I. He's an authority on radio drama. And even though Joe didn't include this in your very clipped bio, I know that you are a playwright and a lyricist also. And didn't you co-author Ain't Misbehavin', the Broadway show?
Guilty. Yeah, I did.
Guilty as charged. So
Many years ago.
wonderful. So we've got a lot going on today. And I thought, guys, that maybe a good way to start would be to just play a clip, just to get everybody going and realizing what kind of music we're talking about here. I know I have 4 clips, and this first one.
Yeah, the first one is everyone's favorite. So what you're going to see is a clip from a film about the CD. This is confusing. We have a CD, which is, of course, an audio product. But we've also released concurrently a documentary film about the CD. And the film includes excerpts from Whitman with amazing visual presentations by our colleague, Peter Bogdanoff. So this is Peter's rendering of an excerpt from Whitman with Bill Sharp as Whitman and Angel conducting PostClassical Ensemble.
So we've got the performers here of the piece that you're going to hear. And I know I remember listening to this before, this is sort of the beginning, right? It's a very hypnotic.
It's where Whitman talks about the grass.
Right.
And it turns out he's talking about a cemetery and the dead, young and old.
That's right. So a lot of our listeners will recognize it from very early on in Song of Myself. So let me see how I can do this so that everyone can enjoy the recording rather than my own crazy stuff on my computer screen here. I'm going to share my screen, and pardon me for the glitches here, then play the piece for you, and we'll come back to everyone in a second.
I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. I loaf and invite my soul, I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of grass. Once a child said, fetching the grass to me with full hands.
What is the grass?
How could I answer the child? I do not know what it is any more than she. I guess it must be the flag of my disposition, out of hopeful green stuff woven. I guess it is the handkerchief of the Lord, a scented gift and remembrance, designedly dropped, bearing the owner's name some way in the corners that we may see and remark and say, whose? Or, I guess the grass is the beautiful uncut hair of graves. Tenderly, I use you, curling grass. It may be you transpire from the breasts of young men. It may be you are from old people. This grass is very dark to be from the white heads of old mothers, dark to come from under the faint red roofs of mouths. I wish I could translate the hints about the dead young men and women, and the hints about old men and mothers, and the offspring taken soon out of their laps. What do you think has become of the young and old men? And what do you think has become of the women and children? They are alive and well somewhere. The smallest sprout shows there is really no death. And if ever there was, it led forward life. All goes onward and outward. Nothing collapses. And to die is different from what anyone supposed, and luckier.
Wow. Wow. I must say, just listening to that, it's overwhelming as someone who loves Whitman. And I know that others are thinking the same. I feel like I have questions for each of you about that recording. Bill, you strike me as such an incredible representation of Whitman's youthful spirit, the joy in your voice and the resonance. The production of the video itself is absolutely lush and gorgeous. And of course, Angel, the music just surrounds one in such a way. I can't help thinking that Walt would have really just loved it. But I think maybe just for our listeners' sakes, we should begin at the beginning. I mean, how did this piece happen? Historically speaking, it's such an unusual idea to sort of collage together pieces of Song of Myself in such a way and create a radio drama. Joe, do you want to start us off with just like a general overview of the play and how it came to be?
Yeah, I'll do that. And then I'm going to pass this question to Murray so he can furnish further
Great.
detail. There are kind of two beginnings here, Karen. There's the radio play, and then there was the very unusual decision to perform and record it, because this radio play was intended to have been heard once and never again. It was never envisioned as a concert work. We have rescued it from the past and presented it as a concert work in the hope that others will perform it as we did with a live audience. So in answer to your first question, as Murray will tell you in greater detail, this historic collaboration between Corwin and Herrmann peaked during World War II, where it served the war effort and was very consciously intended as a patriotic instrument to rally the home front. Corwin was a connoisseur of poetry. The three writers who most influenced him were Thomas Wolfe, who nobody reads anymore, Carl Sandburg, who almost nobody reads anymore, and Walt Whitman. And his signature was a kind of free verse that's invested with the style and affect of Whitman. And so, as I've mentioned to you a number of times at our meetings when we were doing the bicentennial stuff, this is an aspect of Whitman's impact and presence in American culture that's completely forgotten. The most important creator of American radio drama, and Murray will tell you in a moment how many millions of people listen to that, was somebody for whom the voice of Whitman was crucial. So that's the first answer. The second answer is we did a Herrmann festival in DC, meaning PostClassical Ensemble, in 2016. And we wanted to view Herrmann in the round and get beyond the idea that he was the supreme Hollywood composer, end of sentence, because he was also an important concert composer and the most important composer for radio drama. And a guy named Christopher Husted shared with me some radio dramas which he was reconstructing, meaning the scores, the parts. And we chose two of them, Untitled and Whitman. And we were, I described this in detail in the film, we were unprepared for the impact of Whitman. You can go on YouTube and listen to the original Charles Lawton Whitman from 1944, and you can barely hear the music. So when we heard this passage in live performance, we had no idea what we would be experiencing. We didn't even have a professional actor. That was in 2016. So we knew that moment we had to return to it with a proper Whitman and record it. And we did that for the that's what you call it, the sesquicentennial, whatever.
Sesquicentennial, yeah, hard to say.
Yeah, it was actually the day after Whitman's 200th birthday. We had hoped to do it on that day, but the National Cathedral gave us the day after. So the day after, we performed and recorded it. And the result, a year later, whatever it is this CD, which was just released a few days ago. And now for a better answer to your first question, I'm going to refer you to Murray. And here's Murray.
Yeah,
And
Murray, maybe you could tell us a little bit. I know I probably, the idea of radio drama is maybe not so well known to our audiences. So maybe you could kind of back up and tell us a little bit more about Norman Corwin and that relationship to poetry, like how this came to be.
Well, Joe's, so I don't know if this is a better answer, but I can maybe give a little bit of more context to it. First thing to remember is that while it does seem odd to us today to combine all these elements, as you said, Karen, in a radio drama, what's that? Well, in 1944, radio was it, Jack. I mean, it was the dominant popular medium. Tens of millions of Americans had radios. Probably, I'm guessing, of households, probably 90% had radios. And network radio was the entertainment and informational medium, much as, if you go back, say, 30 years ago, television was the dominant medium with 3 or 4 networks, 5 networks. So nobody would have thought anything of hearing a radio drama. Radio dramas, there were dozens of them every night. The kings of radio, and they were mostly kings, as opposed to queens, although there's some very significant people in sound effects and also in production who were women. But the big names were Orson Welles and Norman Corwin and Arch Oboler. And Welles, who always said that his best work was done in radio, and I think he was right. And his biographer, I think it's Simon Callow, agrees. They shared Bernard Herrmann in common. Bernard Herrmann did a lot of scores for Welles, and he did even more, I think, for Corwin. And because it was a popular medium, and because there were series, you wanted to tune in every Thursday night at 7 o'clock to hear this or that show. This particular show was called the Columbia Workshop, and it was done on a sustaining basis by the CBS network, which means they didn't have any commercials. We're putting this on because it's a public good, and we want Norman Corwin to have this palette with which to compose his dramas. It's important to remember Herrmann wrote these things every week. He'd have a new score every week. He'd sort of dash them off, I guess. And this one especially is a classic. I did make a couple of notes. Oh, one is that sesquicentennial was 150th birthday. So this is the bicentennial, right, of his birthday.
Oh, right. Yes, I even said the wrong thing myself. Sorry about that. It was indeed the bicentennial.
So radio was it. It was the dominant popular form. Corwin, during World War II, was the dominant producer. He was a young man. He was in his 30s. And as Joe said, he had this very stentorian, almost overwrought style. And I think it's a terrible thing to say because he was a genius. He worked almost till he was 100 years old. When I worked at NPR in the 1990s, we actually produced his last few radio dramas in the 1990s. But so I have great respect for him. But one of the best things about this particular piece is he doesn't write much. It's all Whitman's works, and Whitman was a better writer than Corwin. He was terribly.
Well, you know what, Murray? There's some improv going on there.
Yeah. I don't know if it's improv, but yeah, he writes lines for actors in it and questions and answers.
And also a little bit of a rewrite of some of Whitman's lines too.
Oh, really? See, that I didn't know.
Yeah. like, for example, with the clip that we just played, there's the part the child said, "What is the grass?" And the way that you all recorded it, you have a female child's voice speaking. And then I don't know if you changed it or if it was Corwin who changed it. And the line is, "I do not know any more than he," but the way that it's recorded, it's she. So that's just one instance. But I think, you know, just as a subject of study, this is a very interesting piece for Whitman scholars, because I think Corwin really knew his Whitman, and he kind of went in there and ghosted him quite a bit in some of the lines. So there might be more Corwin in there than we think there is.
And you made a point earlier on a thing that we did for this film that Joe talked about, and of which we've seen part, that he was pretty hip in his choices of Whitman, right?
Oh yeah, and picking more obscure works along with really well-known works. So we're talking about someone who was really fluent with Whitman. And also even just the medium of radio is perfect for Whitman. It's a democratic, and as you said, millions of people listening. It's free, you know, it happens every week. And I think about Whitman's love of oratory. You know, it was his dream to be an orator in the 19th century before he became a poet. And near his death, legend has it that one of somebody came and recorded him. And it's been used actually in like Levi's ads. There's an actual recording supposedly of Walt Whitman reciting his poem America. So I think Whitman, if he would have been around when radio got started, he would have fully embraced this medium.
Would have had his own show.
Probably, and just delighted in the way that his verse could spread in an oral and accessible medium.
There was a lot of poetry in old time radio. There were local shows where somebody would come on every night and read poetry. That's one of the big contributions, by the way. That was a particular style of program that was dominated by women, and that's one of the things that Corwin certainly shares with Whitman. They love the sound of the words. They love geography, place names, Native American names, all those things. But as Joe said, he was very much influenced by Thomas Wolfe and influenced by Sandburg. So some of the prose is a little creaky today. And the fact that he relied so heavily on Whitman for this one is great. I just want to make one more point, and that is the context of this. This is at the height of World War II. This is in, I don't remember the exact date. Joe, was March of 1944? It was right around D-Day, so right before or after. And so imagine yourself listening to this with, you know, your boy overseas. You know, imagine yourself listening to this and your next door neighbor has just gotten a telegram from the War Department. This was a really big deal. And the other thing is the glory, as Joe said, if you listen to it now, and you can find the actual broadcast, transcription of the broadcast online, but you can't hear the music. And thanks to Angel and Joe and Bill, we hear this in glorious, glorious sound.
Another thing Murray said, I want you not to omit something that you said in the film, Murray, which I just quoted in my blog. This confluence of fine art and a mass medium is something we've lost today.
Oh, yeah.
It's worth an hour, right?
Yeah, it's worth, yeah, we could talk about this a lot, but these were people, there was even a bit of this spirit in Hollywood movies where Pauline Kael makes this point that you can say what you want about Harry Cohn and Sam Goldwyn and all these guys who ran Hollywood studios who were often Philistines, but they thought of what they were doing as a public service, that they were trying to help the country that had been so good to them. And as a result, you could tune in your radio and you would hear all kinds of great domes, thinkers, poets, musicians, scholars, and it sort of raised the level of discourse. And it was not lowest common denominator. There were, you know, kind of puerile sitcoms, and there were crazy quiz shows, but some of the best of all American humor started in radio. Fred Allen, Jack Benny, stuff that you had to think about. And yeah, unhappily, that stuff is still available to us if we look for it online or sometimes in broadcast media, but it was unavoidable back then.
That's fabulous, actually. And you've got my wheels turning about Whitman's role in this very democratic medium, especially around wartime, because I don't know if you all are familiar with these little booklets that were distributed to the armed forces. They came out with very cheap paperback pamphlet versions of classic texts. And of course, Whitman's poetry was one of the most popular things to distribute to the soldiers. I actually bought one on eBay. It's called A Wartime Whitman. And it's got a preface by some lieutenant, and all of the truly democratic or the Civil War poems wind up in there. So Whitman is really being heard and read around this time. And the kind of rediscovery of this radio drama, I think for a lot of people out there signals maybe an opportunity to look into just how prevalent his voice was around this time. So thank you, Murray. And I definitely want to get to Bill and to Angel and talk more about the pieces themselves. Angel, in particular, I would love to hear you talk about Herrmann's compositional response to Whitman's verse, but maybe we'll play another cut first just to warm up to that. I have the second track queued up here. These are all available on YouTube. And Joe, I guess the whole film now that we made, is that also available on YouTube?
No, you go to PostClassical Ensemble YouTube.
Okay, so everyone can see the whole thing. Okay, I'm playing excerpts that
CD you can buy, on Amazon. It's a Naxos CD. It's about 2 days old.
Terrific, thank you. So we've got another short excerpt here, and I guess this one is really interesting because it seems to me that the composers are thinking about the soldiers and bringing them home in a way, right? There's evocations of Manhattan and of beaches, scenes of comfort. So let me share my screen, and I've got cut number 2 for you all coming up.
Whether I walk the streets of Manhattan or wade with naked feet along the beach just in the edge of the water, or stand under trees in the woods, or talk by day with anyone I love, or sleep in the bed at night with anyone I love, or sit at table at dinner with the rest, or look at strangers opposite me riding in the car, or watch honeybees busy around the hive of a summer afternoon, or animals feeding in the fields, or birds, or the wonderfulness of insects in the air, or the wonderfulness of the sundown, or the stars shining so quiet and bright. What stranger miracles are there?
Wow. Joe, will you remind me who did the visuals there?
Peter Bogdanoff.
Spectacular.
I asked him to tune in. I don't know if he's in our audience tonight or not.
All right. Peter, if you're out there, say hello on the chat. We are just loving the lushness of not only hearing this Whitman, but seeing the way that you portrayed him. Back to you, Angel. I'm hearing, when I hear this, I think about movies. It sounds like a movie soundtrack, and I guess that's not a mistake to hear that, but there's sort of a creation of a space that I want to inhabit. And I'm hoping you can tell us more about that compositional response that Herrmann had to the verses.
Absolutely. Well, there is a Herrmann sound. This is, to me, also the discovery is that when we listen to 3 measures of his music, we already feel, okay, that's Bernard Herrmann. And why is this music so sublime? Well, I have a word for that: simplicity. Everything is so simple I mean, it's the beauty, the excellence of the simple things. You know, the instrumentation of the first excerpt we heard, strings, the color of the harp that is taken over by the celesta. And then suddenly we have a cello solo accompanying there. The strings very soft, long chords. The lower strings are playing a melody that is also repeated. And then in the second section is a change of a world, very, very, in that sense, very visual. And then we have a kind of a Wagnerian ending there at the end of the grass. So these simple things that actually are even more clear in the next excerpt that you played, which is Miracles, in which actually Herrmann mirrors so beautifully the idea of the simple things that Whitman is talking, and the chords that he's using, you know, very simple chords, F major, E minor, C major, but the way all this is combined is magical, you know. So this is, to me, the extraordinary way that the music of Herrmann creates. And there is something that I find is very important to that Moore mentioned, which is the immediacy of the things. These guys had to produce something every Thursday. So it's back to Bach writing a cantata every weekend, you know, the idea of the artisan making music. So we have to make things that work. And I love that, going back to that idea of the artisan, the Haydn that had to write a serenade because the cousins of the king were having chocolate with churros that oven, you know, and then they had to prepare something for that. So I think that's really very, very exciting about this. And actually, I have a question for you, Karen.
Sure.
Was Whitman a fastidious writer, somebody that was very much into the detail, or was he a little bit like this, that he had to write a poem? And how was that? How was his personality about? Because that I coincide with this idea of creating something that has to be done immediately, or Whitman was more fastidious and more, it took more time for him to write?
Well, it's a great question, and you are making me think about Whitman with your description of the music itself, right? Because Whitman very much speaks to the people. He is the father of free verse, right? So there's no rhyme, there's no sort of ornament here, and there's very clear, simple language in this poetry, right? Anyone can read it. So I can see how the composition sort of, picks up on that idea, right? Presents things, as you say, in recognizable chords and patterns. Whitman certainly wanted to appear spontaneous, right? The poetry looks like it's just been slapdashed onto the page, but in fact, behind the scenes, he was very much a poet of revision. So that kind of free form, maverick style is a cultivated style over many, many rewrites and revisions. This book that he wrote, Leaves of Grass, he actually writes the book, depending on how you count it, up to 9 different times. And each time he publishes a few poems, Song of Myself is always in there, the Sleepers, I Sing the Body Electric, and he keeps adding to them, but also improving and changing his compositional process. So I think, like many romantics, right, the appearance of ease and grace and spontaneity has a very deep backstory, right? There's lots and lots of work going on with that. Does that sound like where these guys are coming from too, Herrmann and Corwin?
Well, I think, for this specific radio play, I feel, I just wanted to emphasize what I said before, which is this immediacy of things that have to be performed immediately also give that component of spontaneity, that goes so well with the poetry of Whitman, simple things. What you said about the chords, simple chords put together in a very creative way, create something sublime.
And I think we should hear a little bit more of it before we get to Bill, because I cannot wait to ask you, Bill, what it's like to be Walt Whitman. Many of us have fantasized about that, but you actually have. So I've got the third clip queued up here. And this is one of my favorite parts of Song of Myself, coming from the latter end of towards the end of the poem, I Tramp a Perpetual Journey. So let me share my screen and everyone can enjoy the visuals and this gorgeous orchestration.
I tramp a perpetual journey. Come listen, all. My signs are a rainproof coat, good shoes, and a staff cut from the woods. No friend of mine takes his ease in my chair. I have no chair. I lead no man to a dinner table, library, exchange. But each man and each woman of you, I lead upon a knoll, my left hand hooking you around the waist, my right hand pointing to landscapes of continents and the public road. These states are the amplest poem. Here is not merely a nation, but a teeming nation of nations. Here the doings of men correspond with the broadcast doings of the day and night. I announce the union more and more compact, indissoluble. I announce splendors and majesties to make all previous politics of the earth insignificant. This America
I'm sorry, guys.
is only you and me. Its power, weapons, testimony are you and me. The officers, capitals, armies, ships are you and me. The war is you and me.
Oh, forgive me, folks, for stopping the visuals there a little bit early. I did that by mistake, and I don't want to lose you. Here you are. I'm having trouble with a couple of things on my computer here. Okay, I've got you back. Just listening again to that lushness, hearing the Star Spangled Banner, or what is the piece that I'm hearing in the background?
America the Beautiful.
America the Beautiful, forgive me. The patriotism of the lines that have been selected, and also the I Tramp a Perpetual Journey section, which is not necessarily patriotic, but about American originality and independence, right? Whitman sort of sets himself up on a hill and is looking at a landscape, and this gorgeous music is taking its time, and kind of, you can imagine the prairies rolling out in front of you. I find it really hard to believe, guys, that, is it true that this was composed in a week? Am I understanding that correctly?
Murray, can we assume it was composed in a week?
he had to produce at least a score every week. So if he knew Whitman was coming, and I'm sure he did, this is part of a trilogy. I think it was called an American Trilogy
Right.
at the Columbia Workshop. And so there was one on Wolf, one on Sandberg, one on Whitman. So I'm sure he knew a little bit in advance when this was due. He might have been working on it for a month, might have been working on it for 2 months, I don't know, but he had to do a score a week. So who knows? He was not working on it for a couple of years. We know that, and yet it's so elegant. And as Angel says, in its simplicity, it may be that, you know, one of the greatest things you have as an artist is a deadline, and that might have really helped get the elegance of this score to where it was.
Wow. And Bill, now back to you and about your very beautiful voiceover representation of Whitman. I'm kind of dying to know how you prepared to do this. Did you wind up reading Whitman to prepare, or were the lyrics to this enough that kind of brought you in? Did you school yourself on Walt before you got to this very thoughtful interpretation of those lines?
Sure, of course, to some extent, you know, yes, I did. I think that, you know, I have to be honest and say that I don't think of what I'm doing there as a portrayal or an enactment of Walt Whitman. You know, I would leave that to a great actor. You know, like Tom Hanks would be a pretty good Whitman, I think. My job, I think of my job as, first of all, to understand the text, to understand to understand the syntax. Obviously, what's under it, sometimes put things into context, you know, because things are sometimes pieced together that are taken a little bit out of context in Leaves of Grass, for example. And that helps. I mean, sometimes that helps, sometimes it doesn't. But I just have to say that the main thing that someone who's doing this needs to do is to, first of all, know what he's saying, why he's saying it, and then, and obviously, anyone who is speaking, you know, the orator's job is to clarify the structure of sentences and paragraphs, you know, so that people listening understand what was said. And I must also say that the tone, the affect, and the pacing are provided by Bernard Herrmann. You know, all you have to do, and that's a little bit of a revelation when one does prepare these texts, then you say, okay, well, let's do it. You know, go ahead, Angel, play the music and I'll speak. And then you hear the music and, you know, it comes out according to the groundwork that, you know, Herrmann has painted the frame in a way. I mean, that's a very modest way of putting it, or has painted the whole background in which this text lives. You know, I mean, I often say, you know, that everything I ever learned about anything in history and culture is because of something that I had to prepare and learn about, you know, because you're looking in all angles of everything you do and trying to understand what's behind it and around it. And so I just am so grateful to have been able to do this and to study these words enough so that, because, you know, you can't say it if you don't get it. And so, and sometimes it takes a little work. And then, I find it then now to listen to it. I agree. It's beautiful.
Now, I know you are a singer, but you do not sing these words, right? They are spoken from what.
Yeah, there's no singing in here. And that's an interesting thing. You know, I would say in recent years, I've been asked to do a few, maybe this is something that singers near retirement start doing, is narrating things. And it's very interesting because of the fact that you don't have, well, it depends on the piece. Some places do give you rhythms, right? but generally you don't have notes and you don't have rhythms. When I said Herrmann creates the pace for you, it's because the music flows at a certain speed, and you see the words there and you think, oh, well, they must go like this, because that's the way it works. But it is sort of a little bit like being on a trapeze without a net, in a way. When you don't, if you're used to being a singer, a musician, you've got notes and rhythms, that sort of, it's the skeleton on which everything hangs. However, one of the things that I'm always teaching my students, I teach at Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore, and is that, you can't, it's not enough. You have to find what's underneath it, and you have to be as confident in your portrayal of this text and as expressive in that portrayal of the text as you would be if you didn't have any notes and rhythms. So we all learn something by doing new things, and this is a little bit of a new thing for me.
I just want to interject. Sorry, Karen, but
Sure, no, go right ahead.
you should bottle everything that Bill just said, because it's a clinic in how to narrate a piece, how to be the speaker, the reader. It's why, in my experience, so many actors have been inadequate in that role, because they're looking to portray a character, and that's not, it's about the words. And when it comes to a musical piece, somebody in the chat room mentioned Aaron Copland's A Lincoln Portrait. If it's that, or if it's Peter and the Wolf or Tubby the Two of It, doesn't matter. It's Branford Marsalis has a line, "The music tells you." And as Bill said, in a great piece, you follow the music. And this is a great piece, and Bill does a superb job. It's not easy to do.
I would like to be asked a question by Karen.
Well, please ask yourself the question.
I would like to be asked, how did Ankel and I happen to choose Bill Sharp to be Whitman in this piece?
All right.
And the
Good
answer is,
question.
we didn't even have to think about it.
Uh-huh.
Great. I agree totally.
The reason we didn't have to think about it is that Bill Sharp is a great singer of words. And his art, if you're familiar with it, and you can go on YouTube and just listen to him sing Ives, because he's probably the greatest living.
Joe, give us a specific recording we should listen to.
Circus Band by Charles Ives. YouTube, William Sharp, Charles Ives Circus Band.
No. General William Booth Enters into Heaven.
Okay, listen to that.
Okay, thank you very much.
What you'll discover is when I say he sings words, it's what you've already discovered listening to Whitman. I'm not talking about diction. I'm not even talking about inflection. There's hardly a singer I can think of who more sings words, whose art as a singer is so invested in the understanding and projection of words and their meaning as Bill Sharp. So that's why we chose Bill to be Whitman.
Oh, shucks.
Wow, that's a good one. Do you all know that Whitman is I think, if not the most set 19th century American poet, he's definitely one of the top 10, right?
Yeah.
So,
and of course, it's interesting. It's always observed in the context of this question that maybe most of those composers are not American. That was the nature of Whitman's iconic stature in Europe as an embodiment of America. I would say my favorite Whitman setting is by Delius. Help me, Bill. It's the one with the birds at the beginning.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
But you're right. The name of it is somebody chatted in.
Karen, the two birds.
Williams.
I should know this, but it probably is some kind of C thing, right? Unless I'm thinking about Vaughan Williams here. C symphony, no?
Anyway.
It's the
It
digital.
says here Sea Drift. Is it Sea Drift?
Yeah, it's Sea Drift.
Okay.
That's a really great Whitman setting. Bill has done the Kurt Weill songs for us quite a bit, which are Whitman settings.
They're wonderful.
Wow, these are beautiful things, but a lot of them are sung, right? I guess that's what.
All of these are sung. They're all sung.
So for me, this recording is a standout because I'm much more familiar with compositional settings in which the poetry is actually sung.
Yeah, of course.
So this is quite different. And Bill, I was just wondering, and Angel, I guess this relates to you too. How was that recorded? Bill, were you there at the moment of the orchestra doing its thing, and you were right in there also?
Well, we did it both ways. We performed it live, which means, of course, right, it was happening simultaneously. But this, after we had done that, so we prepared it that way, this was actually dubbed over the orchestral tracks. Right?
Because it seems to fit so nicely. I mean, I just get the feeling that you're in there with the musicians.
Bill is a genius. Bill is a genius, and he only is able to do that. Exactly what he said. We did that live performance, which was an incredible experience. Imagine at the Washington National Cathedral, and then we recorded the music, and over the music, he did the whole narration. And it was.
But I just have to say that if we had not, it would have been difficult.
Very difficult.
If we had not already performed the piece.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We're running out of time. Unfortunately, I'm so enjoying basking in all of this talent and discussion. May I play the last clip just to tantalize people a bit more? This one I feel like is ultra patriotic, right? This has a lot of uber patriotic themes. And let me just share my screen so everyone can enjoy.
A simple, separate person, yet utter the word democratic, the word en masse, of life immense in passion, pulse, and power. The modern man, I sing. Behold, I do not give lectures or a little charity. When I give myself. I do not ask who you are. That is not important to me. You can do nothing and be nothing but what I will enfold you. To the cotton field drudge or cleaner of privies, I lean. On his right cheek, I put the family kiss, and in my soul I swear I will never deny him. Oh, despairer, here is my neck. By God, you shall not go down. Hang your whole weight upon me. I dilate you with tremendous breath. I buoy you up. Every room of the house I do fill with an armed force.
Oh, wow. Okay. I don't care what you say, Bill. You are my new Walt Whitman. And
I love that part. I love that. I just think it's fantastic.
You know, Peter is out there. Karen, did you want to? We should certainly acknowledge that Peter Bogdanoff is here with us. Did you want to ask him anything?
yeah, Peter, I'm not sure. Well, we can't get him up here with
I
us.
see. Okay.
Right. So he's in the audience. I mean, we did all say hello, and I'm so glad that he's here. And those of you that are watching, Peter is the genius behind the actual visuals. So if you have been enjoying that mixture of visuals and music, you must see the film that was just finished yesterday, right, Joe?
Yeah.
And again, available at Naxos and at PostClassical, your
Go to
website.
YouTube, PostClassical Ensemble.
Okay, and along, of course, with the album itself, which you all know where to get that. But I did want to ask one last question with my 1 minute left, and I felt like that clip led to it. Joe, maybe you can lead us with this, but the significance of listening to this for us today. I feel like you're going to give me a political answer somehow with all that democracy there, but Like how does this tie in with us? Like, why should we care about this 1944 radio play?
I just wrote a blog on that. You can find it at artsjournal.com/UQ for the unanswered question, in which I said it was subversive and inspirational. Maybe that's a summation of how I experienced this piece, equally right now as subversive and inspirational. Maybe more subversive than inspirational. What do you think?
Anybody else want to
Yeah.
chime in there?
Characteristically, I'll jump in. The other thing about it is I think it really, and I am no Whitman scholar, but a Whitman fan, and I think quite simply, it means that Walt Whitman's articulation of democracy, his definition of democracy, clearly was what Norman Corwin thought had to be mobilized and sent onto the battlefield. It was the proper definition of American democracy in 1944, and I'd argue it is 75 years later. It's still the best.
Thank you for that, Murray. Any other last words? Angel, Bill, Joe?
Bill talks about this very eloquently in the film. Bill, why don't you?
I did. Well, everybody's got to watch the film then. I'm going to see how eloquent that was.
I'm looking forward to it too. I think, Bill, we just want to hear your voice some more. That's all. But unfortunately, we do have to go. And I do want to thank all of you, Joe, Angel, Bill, Murray. This has been so much fun. And the fun continues when you actually play the CD at home. Just sit back with a good glass of wine and really bask in this gorgeous music that we owe these four and many more. And thank you, Peter, again, for illuminating us in such a beautiful way. Good night, everyone. Thank you again, everyone, for showing up, and for the audience for tuning in. We'll see you next week for Barbara Bear at the Library of Congress. Have a good evening, and good music to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.